Michael Doyen from Munger, Tolles & Olson here for PG&E. With me also is the new interim Chief Executive Officer of PG&E, and stepped out into the hall for just a moment is the Vice President of Wildfire Safety and Public Engagement.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Nick Axelrod, Munger, Tolles & Olson on behalf of PG&E.
Mike Ramsey, Butte County District Attorney on behalf of the people.
Jennifer Dupre-Tokus, Butte County District Attorney's Office for the people.
Mark Knoll, Butte County DA for the people.
Thank you, Council. Ladies and gentlemen, we are continuing with the process of hearing from family members of victims to the Camp Fire. Mr. Ramsey, you may continue.
Thank you, Aaron. A slight change from the list that the court has. We'd be talking about victim Deborah Morningstar, and that would be by her sister Becky Nelson.
Good afternoon, Ms. Nelson. If you could make sure you, actually you don't, we've changed microphones from this morning in case you were listening earlier today, and so this microphone is a little more vibrant, so you don't have to worry about staying quite as close to it.
Okay.
And could you, for the record, tell us your name and spell your last name, please?
My name is Rebecca Nelson, Nelson.
All right.
I go by Becky to my family and friends.
All right, thank you. You may go ahead.
Okay. My name is Becky Nelson. I am a Camp Fire survivor. I lived in Paradise for 40 years, working as an educator in the local schools for nearly 27 years. My husband and I evacuated Paradise on the morning of Thursday morning, November 8th, during the Camp Fire. The evacuation that day, to say the least, was not an easy journey. The evacuation out of Paradise took me nearly 4 hours when I finally reached my son's home in Chico. This drive to his house would normally take me 20 minutes. In some ways, I feel that I haven't finished that evacuation journey because of the deep impact this event has had on my life. At one point during the evacuation, driving out of Paradise, I was confronted with flames and realized that I may not make it out. Luckily, I was able to get a call through to some of my family members. I frantically told them what was happening and that I was in a pretty bad way. I was also able to reach my husband, who was somewhere behind me evacuating on the same road in another car. I told him that he would have to face an awful gauntlet of flames in order to get out the way we were traveling. I begged him to consider looking for another road out. It was inconceivable to me at the time there was no safe way out of Paradise. Later, I learned that all escape routes were on fire. Days later, we learned that my 65-year-old sister, Debbie Morningstar, lost her life in the fire. She was a loving member of the Tomer family of which I was born. She was a sister, a daughter, and an aunt. She lived in Paradise for more than 35 years. At the time of the fire, she lived alone with her cats. She could not escape the flames that consumed the entire town of Paradise. She did not drive, which prevented her from being able to leave her home. She did not deserve to die this way. Normally, during an evacuation, having faced several evacuations over the 40 years in Paradise, my husband and I would go to check on my sister because she had no way to leave. On this day for this fire, there was simply no way to reach her. I was literally stuck in traffic on Skyway, sandwiched between 4 lanes of cars, traveling at either a snail's pace or not at all. The best I could do was to get my other family members to contact the police so they could help Debbie evacuate. I believed at the time that the police would send someone to help her out of the fire. The authorities did finally reach Debbie, but it was 2 days later, on Saturday, November 10th, 2018. Their delay in reaching my sister was directly related to the size and scope of the campfire and the overwhelming needs that stretched all the community resources beyond their limits. The police simply could not get to her because they were busy attending to greater community needs, such as evacuating hospitals and nursing homes. I don't know if you can really understand how hard it has been for me and my family to process that my sister lost her life in the fire. For me, it is especially difficult because I thought at one point I would lose my life on that day. When evacuating, I was in sheer panic, driving through the flames in the blackest smoke I'd ever seen. I still have nightmares, as well as thoughts in the daytime, awake hours, of what Debbie's last moments must have been like. I imagine her holding her beloved cats as the smoke and flames took her life. For my son, when he was able to finally visit Debbie's home where she died, he actually found some of her remains left by the coroners who hastily, in their retrieval, left part of her body there. This is a horrific memory he will have to live for his whole life. On some days, it's just too much to bear. I've been fighting every day to stay mentally strong since the fire. It has been a struggle, a real fight to get through the obvious trauma my family and I experienced that day. And to add one more thing to this tragedy, my entire town was destroyed. Our way of life, the lives of my friends and family were all destroyed that day. Street after street, business after business, family after family, church after church, school after school were destroyed. My husband and I lived and worked in Paradise for 40 years. My son was born and raised in the home we lost, though it pales in comparison to losing my sister, as my husband and I have begun to rebuild our lives. There are constant daily reminders that we lost our beloved Paradise home. All of our mementos, pictures, precious items, all that we built, owned it, cherished it, loved. The things that made our house a home are now gone. Today, our new life is void of these things we held dear. I know that I am just one voice of the thousands of people who lost so much because of the campfire, but I want you to hear my voice. I want those of you who are in the power and the authority to hold PG&E accountable to make sure they will never do this again. I don't want what happened to the people in towns of Paradise, Magalia, and Concow to happen to any other community. PG&E must be made to make safety their #1 priority. And now that PG&E has admitted to their part in causing the fire, damaging so many lives, they should receive a sentence that matches their culpability, taking into account that this is not the first time they have caused death, destruction, and injury to their customers. Simply put, the decent and right thing to do now is assign the most severe penalty allowed under the law. Thank you for taking the time to hear my story.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson.
The next victim to be spoken of is James Garner, and will be by his sister, Linda Bowcom.
Good afternoon, Ms. Bowcom. Could you please, for the record, give us your name and spell your last name for us?
My name is Linda Garner Baucom, B-A-U-C-O-M.
Thank you, Ms. Bowcom. Go ahead.
Thank you. I haven't had to do this, so having to write and talk about my brother Jim is both painful and loving. He was always someone I always looked up to growing up. He was one boy of 5 children, 2 older girls, 2 younger girls. He was proud of us, and once in a while would get frustrated, you know, because we'd pick on him. So I was so proud of him following in my father's footsteps. I joined in the Navy at 18 years old and was in for 20 years. He was such a smart man, and I could always depend on him for any computer issues, because in the Navy, he was a top secret computer worker. Can't ever ask him what he did because he couldn't tell me. But I had any problems, he'd always fix my computer for me. I really miss him because he just isn't there for me to call anymore. But I'm a godly person, and I know he's looking down on us. And he watches over us girls. I feel his love always, and I miss him so much. And this is my husband, Bert Bacham.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Ms. Balcom.
Want to say something? Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Have we heard from Mr. Hinkle? Is he here? I am.
Still on his way.
Still on his way. Okay. All right. The next on this, Mr. Hinkle's brother, I understand has been delayed in traffic. He will be here shortly. So we will go to the victim, Marie Wehe, and daughter-in-law Lisa will be speaking.
Good afternoon, Ms. Wehe. For the record, could you please tell us your name and spell your last name for us?
My name's Lisa Wehe, W-E-H-E.
Go ahead.
All right, Honorable Judge, my name is Lisa Wehe, and Tommy, my husband, our mother was Marie Wehe. She burned to death in the campfire. The last time my husband and I spoke with Mom was the night before the fire. She told us she had received an automated call from PG&E letting her know the power was going to be shut off. We didn't think much of it. We said our goodbyes and told her we loved her. We never could have imagined that it would be the last time we spoke. When we heard about the fire early the next morning, my husband jumped in the car and raced to Concow to try to find her, but was stopped by roadblocks just miles from her home. Our family spent the next 15 days searching shelters and Facebook and everywhere for some sign that she may be okay. We learned from the sheriff's office that Mom burned alive in her truck, trying to escape. We live with that image every day. The suffering she must have endured is unthinkable. Our mother was the center of our life. Sorry. She worked tirelessly to love and care for us. She spent the last several years caring for our father, who had been happily married to for over 60 years. Our father sadly passed in March of 2018, which devastated our family. We were finally starting to heal, and Mom, a cancer survivor herself, seemed happy again. We would go visit her every Sunday and to help her with the house or whatever she needed done. We took her to lunch or shopping, wherever she wanted. She was finally her old self again, the carefree, loving mother and grandmother that we remembered. PG&E has taken the most important person in our family away from us. They started the fire and then walked away. November 8, 2018 will always be the day that PG&E killed our mother. We still suffer on a daily basis as we've been stuck in this horrible limbo waiting for resolution. Instead of mourning her loss, we are constantly reliving her painful death. Tommy and I are in a unique position as members of the Tort Claimant Committee, the TCC. We, along with other members of the TCC, have been fighting for justice for over a year and a half now. If PG&E felt any remorse for the people they've killed or any regret for the communities they've destroyed, they would have settled with the wildfire victims first. Instead, they willfully do everything possible to put money back in their own pockets. They even had the audacity to ask the families of the people they killed to pay their manslaughter fine. This company continues to act as if this is just business as usual. PG&E has caused the largest and deadliest wildfires in California history these past few years, burning 500,000 acres and killing 128 people. How many more lives will we let them take? How many more communities will we let them destroy? PG&E must be held accountable for the crimes they've committed. They have put profit over people year after year, and the state of California just keeps letting it happen. The company's acceptance of guilt is inconsequential if the appropriate safety measures are not enacted to prevent the future loss of life and property. There needs to be a consolidated commitment by the company, our government, and the courts to facilitate change and not simply place the burden on the fire victims and their families to rebuild our communities. While PG&E is on track to exit bankruptcy soon, the fire victims, ratepayers, and citizens of California are left with a lot of uncertainty for what the future holds. There needs to be clarity in this process to implement change and ensure that such catastrophes do not happen again. Without it, my mother, Marie Wehe, and the 83 other victims of the Camp Fire died for nothing. We are asking the court to insist that PG&E deal fairly with the wildfire victims and allow the families of those killed on November 8, 2018 to grieve and heal. Give us the closure we need and insist that PG&E act responsibly, fairly, and expeditiously with the wildfire victims so we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wehe.
This time the victim to be spoken of is Russell Stuart, and this would be by his daughter, Shurlyn, and she will do it from the witness box here.
Ms. Stewart, good afternoon. Could you tell us your name and spell your last name for us, please?
Sure. My name is Shurlyn Stuart, S-T-E-W-A-R-T.
Great, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Russell Stuart was my dad. I choose to speak to you today about the day of the fire and the weeks that followed. Only because when I think about my dad, I don't smile and remember the good times. I cry. Because the memory of him is forever tainted with the way that he died. He deserved better than that. The morning of November 8th, 2018, I saw the smoke near Paradise, California. I wasn't sure what it was. It looked like fog to me. I don't live too far away. I checked the news, and I saw that there was a small fire in Paradise. This was still early in the morning. I called my dad, who lived there, to check on him. I called him, and he didn't answer. My guess is that he was probably still sleeping. I left a frantic message, and 2 minutes later, he called me back. I could hear wind and popping and his 14 chihuahuas barking. I spoke to him one last time, and the fire was already there. I heard the fear in his voice, though he tried to assure me that he was okay. Later, I would find out that his neighbors had left 20 minutes earlier and barely escaped with their lives. I had no idea how big the fire was at this time or what devastation was to come. I told my dad to go out and see if he could see any firemen. And then I told him to come back inside and call me right back. I will never get that call. My dad died that day. Probably minutes after I spoke to him. My voice was the last thing he heard saying I love you. We shared a few texts in the next 5 minutes after our call. His last text to me was, I'm okay for now. Pray. And he said that he loved me. I continued to send texts through the next day and into the next morning. The last one I sent was telling him that I loved him, and I can't imagine how scary this all was and is for him, and that I was looking for him, and that I would find him. The weeks that followed were filled with DNA samples, crushing guilt, fleeting bits of hope that eventually gave way to heartbreak, followed by FEMA and finality, crying every day, triggered by videos of the fire. Remember, I still live in the area. Love to smell the smoke for days and look into the faces of people who lost their homes. I would break down in the middle of the grocery store or a restaurant because all anyone was talking about was the fire and how thankfully they all made it out alive. Eventually, I had to give in and admit that I needed help. The doctor prescribed me pills for nightmares and advised I see someone for PTSD, none of which helped. My brother had not been in touch with my dad for years leading up to the fire, and now they'll never get a chance to catch up and be father and son. My dad would tell me that I was his person, and that everyone needed somebody and that I was his. I would make sure he was okay. He didn't have internet, so when he had problems or questions about his medications or things his doctor had told him, I would research it for him. I would let him know that he was not alone. Call and visit on holidays and birthdays. My dad was very much a part of my life, and I was his person. Maybe hearing my story, knowing my dad's last moments, PG&E can share in the guilt I feel, share in some of the nightmares, and let's be honest, they come in the middle of the day, and share in the sadness, knowing this all could have been avoided. Maybe my dad's story can serve as a reminder of what is actually important. And it's not money, it's family and love. And they stole that from me. My dad is dead, burned alive along with his 14 best friends, his 14 chihuahuas. No walking me down the aisle, no watching my brother's daughter grow up, no meeting future grandchildren. Done. My brother and I have lost our dad in a horrible way, gone forever. My dad was 63 years old. There's no rebuilding for us. There's no looking for the future. Our tragedy is final. And we're unsure which is worse, pain of what happened or the ache for what never will. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart.
Thank you.
This would be the time, Your Honor, to make probably the phone call in terms of the Joseph Rabtoy. Okay. And that is his father, Gary Rabtoy, that would be waiting for the phone call.
All right, the court will go ahead and make that phone call, and I will be the one that court responds initially, and then we'll turn it over to you.
Hello,
Hi, is this Gary Rabbitt?
it is.
Hi, this is Judge Mike Deems in the Butte County, California Superior Court, and we're calling you as the father of Joseph, and understand that you wanted to provide a statement to the court on Joseph's behalf. Is that right?
Yes, that is. Thank you.
Can you go ahead and, for the record, give us your name and spell your last name for us?
Okay, I will. Well, for the record, should I give the time and everything?
No, we're good.
Okay. My name is Gary Rabbitt. The last name is spelled, I'll spell it phonetically. R as in Romeo, A as in Alpha, B as in Beta, E as in Echo, T as in Tango, O as in Oscar, and Y as in Yankee. Rabbitoy.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rabbitoy. I guess Mr. Ramsey, we'll just let him go forward. So, Mr. Rabbitoy, we are in open court here this afternoon, and why don't you please tell us what you'd like to tell us about your son?
Okay, what I'd like to do is go over the victim impact statement that I had written out. You may have a copy of it.
Yes, I do.
As well. So I'll begin with that. My name is Gary Michael Rabbitoy, and I am the father of Joseph Douglas Rabbitoy, a victim of the Camp Fire, which took the lives of 83 others as well. The above fire was caused by PG&E's knowingly repeated, reckless, and hazardous lack of attention to maintenance of both its infrastructure and environment without consideration for human, animal, or plant life. This ultimately led to the biggest loss of life in the history of California wildfires and was the proximate and culpable cause of Joseph's demise. As a retired physician and volunteer fireman, I have seen the loss of life and the immense suffering. I have a hard time at this point. Of those affected by fire in all aspects. From a personal standpoint, the pain never goes away. Just writing this brings tears to my eyes. I believe the same happens at some level to not only the loved ones of the victims, but also to those in the extended community. Knowing that it could have been prevented by responsible action on the part of PG&E makes it even worse. As far as the future goes, and speaking as a father, I had hoped that Joseph would have outlived me, had a family of his own, and a good life into his old age. Happy times and perseverance through hardships were a part of him. We had some wonderful times together. I loved him. Beyond that, I still think about him and mourn him, and won't ever recover from his loss. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak with you.
All right.
Again, I very much appreciate your giving me the opportunity to tell you about Joe and how I feel.
Mr. Rabbitoy, thank you very much for being available on the telephone for our court today.
Thank you, Judge Deems. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
The next person that should be standing by on the phone, Your Honor, we're skipping over Mr. Fernandez, would be the victim of Joan Tracy, and this would be her brother, Ted Ratliff. If we make that phone call to Mr. Ratliff.
Thank you, Mr. Ramsey. We'll go ahead and make that call.
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message.
Probably will not be leaving a message. We'll try again in a little bit.
Try again. It would be then for Mr. Duvall and his son, then Brandon Duvall.
All right, we'll make that call. Good afternoon. Is this Brandon Duvall?
Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Judge Mike Deems. I'm with the Butte County Superior Court, and my understanding is that you wanted to provide a statement to the court concerning your father, Robert. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
All right. Just for the record, could I have if you could just state your name and spell your last name, please.
Yeah, my name is Brandon Duvall, Duvall.
Thank you, Mr. Duvall. Why don't you go ahead and tell me what you want to do, tell the court about your father?
All right, thank you so much. I regret that I'm not able to attend the proceeding in person due to the pandemic, of course. However, I do appreciate the opportunity to address the court and the defendants regarding the campfire and the death of my father, Robert Duvall. Needless to say, I've been immensely affected by the unfathomable tragedy that occurred on that morning in early November 2018. This fiasco has caused my family and me a great deal of suffering and will continue to do so. But while I experienced many of the same hardships like PTSD, depression, anxiety, and financial struggles like other survivors and next of kin do as a result of your negligence, my personal plight is ancillary to the anguish, agony, and unimaginable pain your company's carelessness caused the innocent people caused in the fire. So instead of focusing on my grief, I would just like to reflect for a minute on what it must have been like for my dad in his final moments as the fire bore down on him. All alone, he was helplessly trapped like a caged animal inside the cab of his truck with no escape in sight. Flames raging red, orange, and yellow violently whipping about in every direction. Sheer panic and hysteria setting in as the blaze quickly engulfed the vehicle. With the heat rapidly intensifying, the stench of melting plastic, rubber, and metal filled the air before a thick blanket of black smoke and ash suffocated the interior. Glass cracking and shattering as he was incinerated alive, the fire indiscriminately burning fabric, flesh, then bone. I wonder if he screamed out in torment until silenced forever by the inferno. My dad's body was so thoroughly annihilated by the fire, it was impossible to identify his remains by any standard protocol. Instead, I was asked to provide a DNA sample in order to confirm that it was in fact him, something no person should ever have to endure. Then, weeks later, the remnants of his once vibrant being were delivered to me through the mail in a cardboard box, a box that I still can't bring myself to open, even more than a year after receiving it. And to top it all off, my father was stranded up on Edgewood Lane, just feet away from his partner, Beverly Powers, who met the same fate within the home that my grandparents built nearly 50 years ago. Not only did he suffer the most horrific death I can imagine, he couldn't even be with the person he loved through their last minutes on this earth. Although Mr. Johnson and many of his colleagues were not with PG&E at the time of this completely avoidable catastrophe, let this be a lesson to them and others who may be blinded by the bottom line and the pursuit of profits. Cutting corners and squeezing out every last penny available only to please your shareholders will cost us all in the end. You have only one responsibility above all else in your function as power providers: to keep everyone safe. Thank you.
Mr. Duvall, thank you very much for taking the time to take this phone call and share that with us this afternoon.
Thanks so much for the opportunity.
All right. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Next phone call would concern victim Sheila Santos, would be her daughter Tammy and Conkey. And if we could call Tammy.
And I don't think we have that number or name on the list that I have.
We would deliver that.
Can we see that first? All right, I have that information. We'll go ahead and make that phone call.
Thank you.
Hello?
Hi, is this Tammy Conkey?
Yes, it is.
Good afternoon. My name is Judge Mike Deems. I'm with the Butte County Superior Court, and we're calling you regarding Sheila Santos. And I know you have, or I understand you have some thoughts you have for the court on her behalf. Is that correct?
Yes, that's my mother.
All right. And so could you please, just for the record, tell us your name and spell your last name, please?
Oh, yes, my name's, a legal name is Tamara Conkey, Konicki.
All right, Ms. Conkey, you can go ahead and tell me what you want to tell the court today.
Really, I just want to let everybody know that right now I'm speaking on behalf of my uncle, my whole family. We had 15 family members in Paradise on November 8th. My day started, I'm in Ohio. I started my day just like any other day. My son went to a basketball game. I went out with my other son to eat. And then scrolling through my phone, and all of a sudden I see a thing on the news that says Paradise is burned to the ground, essentially. I started calling my family. I can't get a hold of my mother. A hold of my sister. Trying to get a hold of all my other family members. And couldn't get a hold of them. It's been one of the most, I was in the Army for 6.5 years in the military. And the worst day of my life. I got in my car. I drove trying to find my mom, searching. I got to California I think I made it within like about 22 hours. And it's, I don't understand how everything it just happened so fast. There was no alerts. Nobody knew anything. My mom took care of my sister who has Turner syndrome, my twin sister. She would go there and check on her. My aunt lives in the same building, and just everything, just is gone. Everything from my family. I want to read a couple of things. My uncle, let's see. As I'm reading for my brother Joseph McMahon. He's my oldest brother. He's the oldest of all four of us. There's four of us. And, we didn't get a chance to say goodbye to our mom. My mom, she did everything she could for us and for her grandkids and raised us. And we didn't even get a chance to say goodbye because of the negligence of PG&E, because they didn't want to go fix their equipment, because they didn't think that human life was important enough. They wanted to save money. And now, I'm without my mom. My brother's without his mom. My twin sister, she doesn't have her. She lost everything, and she doesn't have her mom. My other brother, no mom. My family lost a sister. My whole family's trying to rebuild, and it's just, I have two family members in Ohio with me. We have family members in Washington, where at one point the whole entire family lived within 5-10 minutes of each other. It's devastating that, we say they're getting charged with 85 counts of manslaughter. Well, are they really? This company neglected to fix their equipment, and a whole 3 towns are destroyed. People's lives are gone, and nobody's paying for it. Nobody's paying for it. It just feels like right now, with everything that's going on in the world with the justice system and lives matter, we're not proving that lives matter. Right now, being rich, having money, being in power is what matters, and it's upsetting because my mom's my best friend. I don't get to call my mom. My brother doesn't get to call his mom. My uncle can't call his sister. It's not fair. These guys get to walk away with what? The CEO of the company got a retirement or got her pension? It's not fair. My mom's roommate, sister-in-law talked for the first 5 minutes of this today. She tried to get them to go, but every Paradise has fires. And this company is still standing and nothing's happening. This is what's wrong with the justice system, is they aren't paying for anything. They're all walking away. There's no jail time. Yet the rest of us, are suffering because all of us, everybody at Paradise, Comcast, we don't have anything. We lost my 15 family members lost everything. Absolutely everything. Is that fair? For what the CEO to walk away and go, oh, instead of spending the $3 million, we spent 2.5, and that's all that matters. I really think this is not fair that we all are suffering and they're walking away. The company gets to live. They get to keep going. What, a $4 million fine? I don't think that's enough. And I think it's unfair that we all have to suffer without our loved ones. Like, I don't get to talk to my mom. And it's pretty shitty for me. Especially being all the way in Ohio. I searched for months for my mom. I was in the military. I fought for the right for PG&E to be able to do all this. I served 6.5 years for people that have rights to protest. For what? For a company to go, oh no, company's money is more important than human life. So we're just going to go ahead and not change that 100-year-old piece of equipment, and it's going to kill all these people. It's kind of wondering, what are we doing? And what's this country doing right now that we can't hold 84 counts of manslaughter for anything? 85, sorry. 84, they don't get to go to jail. They don't do anything. It's not, all these people get to walk away. Well, we all suffer continuously, day by day. We have nightmares. And I was in Afghanistan. I spent a year in Afghanistan, and that was worse. That was worse than than fighting and shooting guns at people who were trying to kill me. So for my mom, I have more PTSD than I do for fighting for my country. And I just have to live with that. That PG&E can do whatever they want. I mean, they don't get probation because they're already on probation for killing 8 people in San Bruno when their gas lines blew up. None of it makes sense. I just asked, I mean, I know they made their plea bargain or whatever, but they deserve something. Somebody deserves to pay for all of the pain and suffering for hundreds and thousands of people. Not just my mom, not just me and my family, not my 15 family members who lost everything. Everybody. I don't think that we are telling the country or the world that this is how it's done. We're saying, oh, go ahead, you have money? Don't worry, you can kill whoever you want. You don't have to fix that equipment. I just don't think it's fair at all for all of us to be suffering and them to be walking away with bonuses and pensions and everything. That's all I have to say.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Konecki. Thank you for taking the time to tell us about this on the phone today.
Thank you for allowing me to do that so I can try to move forward with this. But
all right.
I just hope the judge does something.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Be my suggestion, Your Honor, that we try Mr. Ratliff again. Any comment? Okay.
All right, let's go ahead and try to recall Mr. Ratcliffe, which is the brother of Joan Tracy.
Hello?
Hi, is this Ted Ratliff?
Yes, it is.
Hi, this is Judge Mike Deems with the Butte County Superior Court. And my understanding is that you wanted to address the court today on behalf of your sister, Joan. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I sent a letter to them, a little impact letter.
Okay, I have a copy of that letter, but I know you wanted to, my understanding is you also wanted to speak about that openly in the court. Is that right?
No, I didn't. No, I'm actually 500 miles away, so.
No, but doing it by telephone. Right now we're in open court, but you're on the phone. Did you want to?
Okay.
Did you want to tell the court what you about Joan?
Oh, sure. I could do that.
And before you get started, tell me your name, just for the record, and spell your last name, please.
Okay, it's Ted, and my last name is Ratliff. That's Ratliff.
All right, Mr. Ratliff, go ahead.
Okay, well, I live down in Southern California. My sister Joan, she lived in Paradise, of course, and she was, I think at the time, 81 years old. She had early stages of Alzheimer's. Her son, Michael, took care of her. He lived with her in Sawmill Lane. And the day of the fire, I got a call from my nephew. He had gone, he's out running errands with his girlfriend, Diane Tracy. No relation to my sister, but with him. But anyway, they were out running errands and the fire started, and they couldn't get back. They were in a traffic jam. They got as far as Billy Lane, or Billy Road rather. And the fire, he called me from the car, and the fire was coming up behind him and all around him. And there was, transformers blowing up and chaos, and people started, he couldn't drive, cars all around him, and people were running by him. So they had to run. And he checked back in with me a little later, and they had to run about a mile up the road, and a fellow in a pickup truck, they got in with him. They got by the traffic jam, and he was going up in curbs, and I guess, and they made it out alive. Now, my nephew Mike, he had a lot of guilt because he couldn't get back to pick up his mom and his dog at the house. And he, for quite a while, was threatening to run the roadblocks to go up there, because it was probably a week or maybe longer that before we knew what the status of the house was. And I was terrified that she was still alive up there with no power, no water, or maybe there would have been water. But anyway, so we finally, one of the insurance adjusters was going up there, and he called me. He had access to go up and look at the property. I don't remember the date, but he went up there and called me and told me the house was gone. And it was probably another couple of weeks after that before they did go into the property and found remains. And then my nephew had to give a blood, a DNA sample, and she was identified. For my nephew Mike, he had a lot of grief. He lost his mom, his dog, his house, his possessions, and he had a lot of guilt. And so he was probably about a year, just under a year. In fact, it was last July 3rd. He actually had a stroke, and he had for about 4 days up in the hospital, and he passed away. And I always believed that his stroke was caused by the stress and everything that happened to him. He was only 52 years old. So within about less than a year, I lost my sister, and he's one of my best friends, and my nephew. And, and for my impact for me, I had, I don't know, hours, hundreds of hours worth of work this mess has caused. And PG&E, I'm glad that they're pleading guilty. They deserve that. And that's about all I have to say, I guess.
All right, Mr. Ratliff, thank you for taking your time this afternoon to take this phone call and to tell us about your sister.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you calling. Bye-bye.
Your Honor, I'm informed that one of the call-ins, Mr. Fernandez, has indicated he would like us to read his statement rather than him do it himself. He feels he cannot at this point by a motion. So if I may step to the podium and read that.
Please do.
I, Zachary Fernandez, and it's Fernandez, and the son of Jesus Fernandez, one of the victims killed in the campfire that PG&E caused. Jesus Fernandez was my father and best friend. He will always be in my memory, and a day does not go by that I don't think about him. He was my mentor, he raised me, and I have always been able to talk to him about anything. My father and I would do almost everything together, from work to going on vacations and playing out in the desert with off-road toys. PG&E, in my perspective, deserves to pay the full price and consequence for the tragedy that has happened, not just for me and my family's loss, but for the other victims that have been involved in this situation as well. Lives have been lost and homes have been ruined from this tragedy, and PG&E should not be able to stay in business, in my opinion. From the research I have read, this isn't the first tragedy they've been involved in. Due to their past and present situations, this will change lives forever. The impact of this tragedy has had on me since the wildfire has to do with me losing a job, and my newly born daughter will never be able to meet her grandfather, along with me not being able to see or talk to my best friend. My father had many friends and was a very loved man, always keeping smiles on people's faces and being the light of the party. Every day that goes by, I think of my father and look back on memories that we've had and keep everything my mentor has told me as a guideline for life. Watching my father run a bakery for the majority of his life has taught me how to manage money and go about everyday life changes. I just wish my father was here to watch his granddaughter grow up and be part of her life, to participate in the activities I did when I was growing up as a child. My father, Jesus Fernandez, will always be my #1 mentor, and that will never change. Aubrey Ann Fernandez is my daughter and will grow up without a grandfather. This will forever affect her future and mine. All I have to tell her is stories and show her pictures of her own grandfather. I feel heartbroken and am in pain every day from knowing my daughter will never experience what it will be like to have a loving and caring grandfather. He was a loving and caring man that would do anything possible for his friends and family. My father being gone now has affected my life extremely by loss of sleep, depression, flashbacks, and memories that bring tears to my eyes.
Thank you. And Counselor, are you prepared to take our afternoon break at this time?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will take the afternoon break. We are in recess. We'll reconvene at 2:30.
Mike Ramsey, Butte County District Attorney for the people.
Jennifer Dupre-Tokus, Butte County District Attorney's Office for the people.
Mark Knoll, Butte County DA's Office for the People.
Thank you, counsel. We are continuing with the presentation of victim impact statements. My understanding, Mr. Ramsey, is at this point in time, the people who reported to you that they were interested in personally delivering their statements, those people have completed their statements, and now it will be the statements that had been provided to the district attorney's office, which you'll be reading. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor.
All right, you may go forward.
Thank you. We reference victim Gordon Dice. It says, "My name is Anna Dice. I am the daughter of the deceased Gordon Dice. I can honestly say that I never expected to write or say these words. My dad was a force of nature. I expected him to live for years yet to come. I am having a hard time writing this because the loss is hard to describe and is different for each person. The death of my father took place on November 8th. I remember that the day before the fire, PG&E said they'd be turning off the power early due to high winds. They did not turn it off. When I woke up that morning, November 8th, it was on the news reporting about a fire in some place called Pulga. When I went outside, the sky looked like sunset, and I wasn't choking on smoke like I usually did during fires. It was eerie. Dad and I were starting our normal routine during fires, which was to make sure not only our property but our neighbors' properties had no weeds and brush to catch fire, watering down the property with hoses and keeping an eye out for the direction of the fire. We watered until PG&E turned off the electricity. Now we had no way to water, contact people, or listen to the news reports about the fire. At some points during the day, I actually asked my dad if I should pack the car, which was unusual for me to ask considering I already knew his answer. The day slowly dragged on till around 2 o'clock when the sky turned black as night. It looked apocalyptic. I had never seen anything like it in my life, and I hope to never see it again. My dad and I watched for a while from the upper property before heading down to the house for dinner. Plans had changed because of the fire, so instead I made chicken and broccoli with a wind-up flashlight. After dinner, I nervously walked up the hill to check on the fire. The flames were blazing down the hillside, so I ran in a mixture of adrenaline and panic down the road. One of my neighbors drove up to stop and talk to Dad briefly. I wasted no time talking, ran into the house, grabbed the box of important papers. I rushed out to the car and went back in for photo albums, our computers, our signed copies of books, home videos, songs, books I had written. I got the dogs in the car, which was hard because the property was now ablaze and they were terrified. I ran into the house one more time in a futile attempt to move some clothes to a spot I hoped they would survive in. So I went back out. Dad and I stopped on his pathway, and he tried talking to me, but we couldn't hear each other over the roar of the fire. I went back in for something, and he went back in for something, and after he did, the deck caught on fire. I ponder sometimes what would have been important enough to make him go back in. Was it Grandma's ashes, his phone book, something that was important enough for him to go back inside? I did not know what to do. I thought about rushing after him, but quickly decided that was madness. Instead, I rushed toward the car and tried honking the horn, hoping he would hear it. At the same time, I was trying to move the car, but it was not moving. The tires had melted. The kitchen collapsed, and I had to decide if I was going to stay in the car, which was heating up, or risk going into the inferno outside. My throat was parched. All I had to drink in the car was a bottle of Dr. Pepper, which I tried to drink slowly. It was getting hot in the car, and I was sweating. Terrified as the cars next to us were catching fire, and I knew one of the dogs and I would be next. I got out of the car and then got my dogs out, and I searched for my purse and Dad's laptop. I tried finding mine, but found something else, which in my frenzy I tossed out of the car onto the road. I could barely see him as choking on the smoke. The car was too hot for me to safely grab anything else. Dogs and I walked up our drive and over to the neighbors, which was not on fire. I set my stuff down, and the dogs and I got wet in the ditch. Sometime around 8 or 9, I would say I found my dad's phone in my pocket. And even though we had no service, I remembered what Dad had said about calling 911 with no cell service. I called, let them know I was still in the canyon and that Dad had died. They said they would send someone for me. I waited until 10, and then I tried calling back, but all the cellular lines were gone by then. I figured they wouldn't be able to get through because of the trees that had fallen. It was the worst night of my life. Aside from Dad being gone, I was surrounded by fire, and when the wind gusted, embers flew every direction. I had to keep getting wet because my hair and jacket would dry out, and then I would sit in my wet clothes trying to stay awake because I thought I wouldn't wake up if I fell asleep. Found gum in my purse and chewed it to keep the saliva flowing so my throat wouldn't dry out too. When I turned on the cell phone's flashlight, a wall of smoke was in front of me so thick I could not see through it. One of my dogs went off but never returned that night. I despaired and forced myself to think of other things, making up stories to keep my mind active. When dawn finally arrived, I was so relieved. I walked up to my neighbor's pond, drank some of the water, and then headed back towards my house. Some of it was still on fire, so I carefully avoided those areas. I found my dog that had left during the night, and at first I thought he was dead because he was covered in so much ash. Thankfully, he woke up, and then I attempted to look for anything that resembled a body. I couldn't find Dad anywhere. Weary, I walked the property until I heard chainsaws down the main road. Heading in that direction, we crawled under a fallen tree between another neighbor's road and trailer park. As I walked, another dog came and joined us. It looked happy to see someone. When we reached the firefighters, they looked so stunned to see us. They quickly got me and sat me down and gave us water. I told them what I could, but my voice was extremely hoarse, and they attempted to get someone to come and get us. However, after a couple of hours, they had to drive us out themselves. Getting to the Red Cross shelter was another experience, but I was able to call a family member and let them know what happened. Even though I'm grateful to have survived, I wish Dad could have as well. Even after all this time, it's like a surreal nightmare, and I can't wake up for. The fire caused a huge devastation in Butte County with so many lives lost, businesses gone. Not only affects me, it affects everyone and will for years. Some people are now homeless because of this. Others are barely hanging on to not being homeless. Well, it's only with the kindness of others that I am not homeless as well. Since the fire, my life has changed in more ways than I can list. I haven't been able to see a medical doctor, but I know I need to have my lungs looked at. When I get sick, my cough lingers longer than it should. I lost Dad and the income we were living on. I lost the community of people that I grew up knowing. Nothing is normal. I am struggling with learning to live without Dad. Exactly 1 month later, one of my dogs passed away because of the fire. I've started doing free counseling sessions, but they only last 8 sessions. Getting to appointments has been hard. I cannot drive. I have received little help from FEMA, and as for the Red Cross and Salvation Army funds I applied for, I haven't heard anything from them. I no longer have a TV or news of any kind, so I missed out on the early programs to get clothes and other items. I'm not alone in this, as other people have been in similar situations. A future without Dad is impossible to think about. My whole life revolved around him and our life in the canyon. I expected him to live many more years because of his stubbornness. My dad was not just a father, he was a mentor to me, and his death is a loss to the many people that knew him. At the same time, I'm grateful for the fact he never had to see everything he worked for be gone. He would have been devastated and furious to see what happened. He would have looked up everything about fire lawsuits that he could before going after PG&E himself. It would have been both glorious and terrifying. I'm having trouble without him because I never learned certain things that are necessary to make a living. Aside from schooling, I've been isolated from people and struggled to express myself to others when talking. It's a difficult life being torn from home like that. I miss my old life with an unbearable ache. I miss the smells and sounds of home. I miss potluck dinners at the schoolhouse, playing chess with Dad and swimming in the creek. Most of all, Dad and the feeling of freedom that the canyon gave me. Next would be victim Rose Farrell. My name is Kimberly Perez, and I am Rose Farrell's granddaughter. This letter on behalf of myself, my husband Tom Perez, and our daughter Ashley Perez. Rose Perez was a young 99-year-old. She had a zest for life with more energy than someone 20 years younger. Her mind was incredibly sharp. At 99 years old, she was still able to live on her own. We always admired her positive nature and outlook on life. When I lost my mother 20 years ago, my grandmother became an important mother figure to my sister and I. We kept in contact with her weekly. She was always involved with what was going on with our family, and I could always count on her for advice. Every month, our family would stay the weekend with her. She enjoyed going out to dinner, the casinos in Orville, and Sunday breakfast together. She truly enjoyed watching her grandkids and great-grandkids grow up. We're looking forward to celebrating my grandmother's 100th birthday in February of 2019 with her friends and family. Rose was also planning to attend her great-granddaughter Ashley's wedding in June of 2019. Rose's immediate and future plans with her family were taken away in a matter of seconds on November 8th, 2018. We are beyond heartbroken when we think of Rose's final moments. It haunts us when we think of my grandmother's final moments of being trapped in her own house with nowhere to go and her friends unable to get her to her in time. The emotional pain and suffering are overwhelming for her family. Next victim be Anna Hastings. My name is James Kavanagh, Knaver. I am the husband of Anna Irene Hastings, who died on November 8th, 2018 in the Paradise Camp Fire. Anna and I met in March of 1976 and became inseparable for the next 43 years. Along with Anna, our Great Dane, Bella, our Dalmatian, Maggie, our tabby cat, Penny, and our cat, Winston, perished in the campfire. Anna was disabled with severe scoliosis and other health challenges and had never driven an automobile. I was in the valley teaching my 4th grade class at McManus School when the fire began. At the end of the school day, I convinced the authorities on the road, at the roadblock at the base of Skyway to let me try to walk home to try and save my family. I'd gotten a mile past Rocky Bluff Estates when I encountered firemen who were battling a wall of flames on the Skyway. I was informed there was no chance of making it through the fire. I'm no forensic or criminal expert, so I won't presume to say what crime was committed. What I found out later was that there was a call into PG&E from a lady who was searching for a horse that had gotten out of the corral. She found it near the Skyway, and as she bridled it up, she heard loud sound coming from above. She looked up, saw large sparks emanating from a transformer on a pole a few feet from her and the horse. The ground below the transformer was very dry, 2+ feet tall grass. I was informed she phoned in the emergency to PG&E, telling me she was going to leave the gate unlocked so they could access her property to attend the dangerous malfunctioning transformer. I was told that in a press conference, PG&E said they didn't feel comfortable entering private property to address the concern. That seems not only unprofessional, but extremely negligent. I can't help thinking that PG&E responded to the emergency that my family would still be alive. Due to the result of the campfire, I lost my wife, companion, and best friend. I also lost our beloved Bella, Maggie, Penny, and Winston. The home and community we loved is now forever gone. I was forced to retire mid-year as I had become homeless as a result of the fire. The home Anna and I had prepared for almost 19 years for retirement was lost as well as all of our dreams. My life has turned completely upside down. I lost my best friend, my dogs and cats, our home, a professional recording studio that took 17 years to build, a high-end guitar collection of over 40 instruments, a sizable collection of vintage guitar tube amplifiers, a great deal of audiophile stereo equipment, a large LP and CD collection, a large collection of American oak antique furniture, a large collection of Oriental art and pottery, all of my family photos, mementos, all of my keepsakes from teaching career, all my clothing, every song and poem I'd written over a 50-year period of time. I am unable to sleep more than an hour or so every other night a day. Since I received the horrible call from Butte County Coroner's Office informing me of Anna's death, I have the unenviable experience of waking up crying from my sleep. I will never be whole again. I have the unshakable feeling that if I let my family down by not rescuing them. Every minute of every day is filled with extreme sadness. I'm a Christian, and the only thing I have left is my faith. Without that, I do not know what I would do. The next are the victims, Matilda, Christina, and Ishka Heffron. Letter from Richard Arnold Heffron, Jr. He is the son of Matilda Heffron, brother of Christina Heffron, and uncle of Ishka Heffron. The crime from my perspective was willful negligence to maintain their equipment, which resulted in the death of many, including my family and numerous others. This negligence resulted in the loss of my family's home, the majority of my personal possessions, sentimental and irreplaceable family items, along with the property of numerous others. This crime has had a significant impact on me and put a tremendous toll on me and my family. Pardon me. I have been damaged emotionally despite every effort to power through this trauma. I am not certain that I will ever be able to find a way to be myself again. My heart has grown colder, battered by numbness and strain, often causing me to withdraw from people and making me feel deeply depressed. I've gone from being a happy, outgoing person everyone loved to feeling constantly alone and distant. I am so deeply sad, feeling as though I have no one to confide in who will truly understand me, aside from my wife. My wife has been so deeply traumatized that now she suffers from panic attacks constantly and has had to see her doctors for help with anxiety. I've gone to a therapist, which did not help, read self-help books, and prayed. I have also tried to put myself more into my work to help with my emotions and to bring some stability back. Do not cry in my office cubicle alone or in my car at lunch, which I've done so many times in secret, and nothing seems to help. The news and documentaries serve as a constant reminders of the loss of my family. Any movie or show with fire scares me and my wife and gives me constant insomnia. I find myself constantly pausing, silently remembering. I can still hear the cries on their 911 call, which I wish I had never heard. No one deserves to go through what my family have gone through. My sister was my best friend. Now all the memories of her are clouded by the pain of her death. I hope one day I'll just remember the good, but that moment is not now, nor any time because of PG&E. My own sister and niece can be heard on their 911 call screaming, with my sister saying she did not want to die and being heard to die on the phone call while the house was engulfed in flames with them inside. Overall, I cannot express how this whole moment in my life has pained and permanently caused me endless amounts of severe emotional distress. I may never be, and doubt I ever will be, the same again. My niece had a hard life to begin with and was constantly struggling to overcome adversity. And yet, right when she got to the surgery to correct how she walked, she died in the most painful way possible, and this just made us hurt more. The endless burden of arranging funerals for the entire remainder of my family has been so hard. My mother's family and father's family was constantly leaving it to me to handle everything, even at the hardest time, to make speeches and statements about all of them. No one should have to bury their whole family and be put under so much stress and pressure. My father's ashes were also lost in the fire and never recovered, so I could not bury them with the rest of my family. Being the only one left in my family, I had to make all the funeral arrangements for the whole family, often doing the best I could to scramble to find financial assistance with the many expenses. I have had to take significant time off work to travel up north to prepare paperwork for FEMA for funeral assistance, to get DNA tests done 4 times at different police stations and medical examiner's office, to meet, talk, both in person and over the phone, to lawyers in bankruptcy court and to estate lawyers over my family's home, often at a moment's notice, making me look unreliable at work and making me fear losing my job. I spent countless hours talking to investigators over the phone and meeting with the funeral home and the church for arrangements. When my family was reported missing, I was constantly pressured by my mother and father's brothers and sisters to find out their status. Then after their deaths were confirmed, I was left to handle everything by myself. I've lost all my familiar inheritance and almost all of my personal possessions that I had in my family's home. Overall, the toll has been immense, and it's drawn on for so long. Even though a year and a half has passed, I'm not certain when this will all be over. Recent years, my wife lost both of her brothers, one to illness, one to a sudden clot. It was my family who helped fill that void in our heart, and one day they were all taken from us by PG&E's negligence. It has left me and my family feeling completely alone in the world. My own daughter is 5 and is without any close relatives, no brothers, no sisters, no first cousins. Whenever she is at home, she sits with a stuffed rabbit my sister crocheted for her. It is her favorite stuffed animal. She sleeps with it every night. But it makes me hurt so much that my daughter will never be able to tell my sister how much she loved it. I despair that they will never see each other again or talk on the phone, that she will never talk to her aunt, cousin, or grandmother ever again. Seemingly hoping for attention for their own reasons and in the violation of my privacy, my family and I have given my phone number to reporters who call out of the blue and ask me for emotional questions, none of which I ever wanted. I just want to heal. I want my family to heal, but it is so hard. The next victim, Eva Holt. This is from the daughter, Linda Dington. It's Dighton. My mom burned to death in a pickup truck while trying to escape from the campfire in Paradise, California, in the morning of November 8th, 2018. I think about it all the time, envisioning her last terrible moments while dying in this horrific, painful way. It is only right that there be some measure of justice and that PG&E is found to be criminally responsible for her death, as well as for the displacement of my sister and I and our families when our homes were destroyed. The lives of our family are permanently scarred by the irrevocable loss of our mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, and sister. Her devoted and beautiful life and her loving kindness was cut short all too soon because of the irresponsible actions of PG&E. Next victim would be Gary Hunter. Statement reads, my name is Brian Lee Hunter, and my father, Gary Lee Hunter, was a victim in the 2018 Camp Fire. My father had a stroke several years ago, and it had affected his mobility. He was left with limited movement on one side of his body and what is known as spasticity. Due to these medical conditions, he spent most of his time in a wheelchair, unable to walk without help. He had had a more recent diagnosis of dementia as well. I was notified at work on the day of the camp fire that my brother couldn't get to my father from his house. He or someone on his behalf had called 911 to try and get someone up there that would be able to get him. My wife and daughter spent the next few days going to shelters looking for him, and we posted on social media trying to see if maybe someone had seen him. Due to my job working at a local grocery store and the impact we were having and the need of the community, I had to continue working. Finally, into the next week, when they were able to search through all the properties, they did find the remains of my father. We were very thankful for the Butte County Sheriff's Office and their support. Having an officer and a chaplain come out was a comforting measure on their part. At first, the waiting game of wondering was that really my dad's remains. Could they have had the wrong house? So many things ran through my head. They found his remains in the back part of the house where the fire led up to where the fire led up to that took his life. The thought that he watched the fire come toward him and what could have been running through his mind. Those are the realities that run through my mind on a regular basis. My daughter and myself had to do DNA swabs so that they could verify my father's remains. After his remains came back from Sacramento to the mortuary, we received a call from the mortuary saying we need to pick up his remains by 4 p.m. on Christmas Eve. I can't tell you how it was to try to go through all of this and come back and try to be the best for my children for the holiday. Whether it be my father or anyone else's father, the thought of someone that would have to die in such a manner is also very struggling. Knowing this could have been prevented is even harder. My dad could and would have been alive today if it wasn't for PG&E. They must be held responsible for the inability to have safe working equipment to all of our communities. I understand there may be many layers of complexity to this situation, but the bottom line is due to their negligence. I don't have a father, nor do the other 80 plus people who lost family members. At a time when I lost my father, I had to be the strength for my children. I don't think to this day truly I have grieved the way that I need to heal. It is hard for me to fathom that an individual that would go out and kill someone would spend their life in prison, but a company who has killed 80 plus people can walk away with nothing other than a small financial slap on the hand. It is sad that this is the way our system works. This event has been a community hardship, to say the least, and has forever changed our community. We have all tried to move on from that day. I don't think any of us will ever move on, whether it was the loss of a human life, a loved pet, house, or belongings. We lost our son 16 years ago, and a tragedy like that, or this, never leaves. Every year it gets a little easier and a little less emotional, but will never be forgotten. Our family will continue this journey of healing, and this verdict or plea deal will not make the healing process any easier. I just hope for everyone's sake that PG&E will be held fully accountable and that there are measures in place that will secure the safety of all communities. Next victim is Dolores and John Malarkey. Or Joanne Malarkey, pardon me. Dolores Joanne Malarkey and her husband, John Malarkey. This is from their daughter. I received a call from my mother's home health care worker about 7:30, pardon me, this is from Richard Sprague, S-P-R-A-G-U-E. Says, I received a call from my mother's home health care worker around 7:30 in the morning stating there was a fire near Paradise and the town was evacuating and I needed to drive up to Paradise, get my parents out of there. I then contacted my mother and told her we were on our way to get them and that we'd be there in about 30 minutes. Once we hit the Skyway in Chico, we found the road to Paradise closed. Panic began to set in. We then tried 2 other routes into Paradise. All were closed to incoming traffic. We were helpless at that moment. I contacted my mother and told them to call 911. I also called 911. I stayed in contact with my folks until about 9:30, at which time all communications was cut off by the fire. I didn't know at that moment that I would never talk to my mother again. The next 4 days were spent desperately searching for my mother and her husband in shelters, hospitals, assisted living, etc. At the time, I thought this can't be happening and this had to be the worst days of our lives. I was wrong. On Monday, November 12th, I received a call from the Butte County Sheriff's Office. Remains of 2 people had been found at where my mother's house once stood. While no identity had been made, I knew it was them, and the sheriff deputy thought the same. While I don't have the right words to describe how I felt, here are a few. Sad, numb, alone, sick, scared, angry. The worst feeling of all is that I let my mother down after I told her I would come and rescue her, and I failed to do that. While I won't mention the name of the utility that killed my mother and her husband and caused a harrowing death to what was otherwise a beautiful life, I will say this: you ruined our lives. Next victim be Helen Pace. My name is Kathy Pace, and it's P-A-C-E. Helen Pace was my mother. My mother lived alone in a mobile home park in Paradise. The morning of the fire, my sister Suzanne Drews drove at 8:30 a.m. toward my mother's house, but was turned away by CAL FIRE personnel. She was told someone would get my mother out. No one did. I feel torn apart just imagining how it must have been for her alone in that morning when she was in her mobile home when it was engulfed by flames. She was 84 with medical issues. She would not have been able to escape on her own. She died alone, trapped in her home. My siblings have lost their beloved mother. My siblings and I have been robbed of our father's cremated remains, which sat in an urn on her living room table. I have been robbed of time with my mother. I was always willing to listen to me. She was always willing to listen to me about my issues. She was always supportive and sympathetic as to how I was feeling. I dearly miss her hugs and kind words of love to me. I will never again feel the softness of her cheek upon mine from loving kisses. The next pair of victims is Joy Porter and Dennis Clark Jr. And this is from next of kin Tammy Fulton, F-U-L-T-O-N. Hello. I wish I could be with all of you in person today. On November 8, 2018, my family and I lost this beautiful soul, shown above in the picture taken with myself. Her name, Joy Porter. You will never have the privilege of knowing her. I will never know the joy of seeing her again. My cousin, Dennis Clark, also died that terrible day. But today you will listen. You will hear about how wonderful they were. You will hear about what you have taken away and the awful toll that this terrible nightmare has taken on our family. I'm so angry. I don't know what to do with the anger. Nobody can understand that at night when I close my eyes, I see horrifying images and endure thoughts that take my sleep. The nightmares I have are so vivid. I want you to know that the images of their charred bodies were videotaped and put on YouTube. These graphic and extremely disturbing images were used in a Netflix documentary as well. Those images will forever haunt me. Yet, once again, our family has no voice. I don't have someone that I can express my anger to. You could never comprehend how much I am hurting. I want to hate you. Unfortunately, I can't. That is not the person that my Aunt Joy helped raise me to be. However, I can never forgive you. My aunt was a kind and giving soul. She was so full of love. She had a special closeness with God. She loved living in the pines, surrounded by nature, and having her own little piece of paradise. She was a truly gifted published poet and artist. I will forever miss her hugs, the type of hug that would pull you into a safe place as she softly whispered, I love you, sweetie. I always knew it was meant just for you. You always knew it was meant just for you. My cousin, Dennis Clark Jr., loved his family above all else. He loved to camp and fish and be with his own children. He left behind 3 young children. Youngest was only 5 years old. You should have been required to be at their service and look at those young faces as they tried to comprehend that their father was gone, now in an urn, sitting alongside their grandmother. But no, our small family had to pick up the fractured pieces that your negligence left behind. They are now living with foster families, separated from everyone and everything that they never even known. The next victim is Forrest Ray. My name is Ron Ray, and this is R-E-A. The son of Forrest Ray, and currently his only living child. Since my mom died over 25 years ago, my father has lived alone in paradise. However, my wife of 19 years, Brenda Ray, and I have been an integral part of his life during this time. The crime, as I see it, relates to the failure of PG&E to maintain, update, and properly shut down lines per protocol, leading to the Paradise campfire that claimed the life of my father. My father's death was directly related to the negligence of PG&E. The impact of my father's death has been devastating to Brenda and me. He was a vibrant part of our family and a significant contributor to society, having a variety of ministries that he maintained during his retirement years. He collected and split wood that was given to those in need. He had a large garden and multiple fruit trees that provided food to local neighbors, church members, and the local gleaners, all at no cost. His wood shop was constantly producing gifts for those around him. Most importantly, we miss our relationship with him. Although older, we believe he still had many active years left, and we will be missing out on all those years of wonderful relationship with great memories. The mental anguish of not knowing what happened to him for over 48 hours was also very stressful. In addition, the distress of considering how one dies in a fire was extremely disturbing, especially for Brenda, who is a physician. When the sheriff called to tell us they'd found a body in my father's house, the sheriff asked us if he was a bilateral amputee. When they said, "No, why do you ask?" there was a silence. And then he said it was because both legs were gone up to the knees. This means that the fire was so hot from the carpet it burned the bones up to his knees. This is such a horrifying thought that we try not to think about it. In the process of identifying his body and obtaining a death certificate took almost 2 months, me having to go to the local coroner's office to give a DNA sample. We've had significant difficulty settling his trust since all original documents were burnt in the fire. We had to hire an estate lawyer to help us through all those details, which is ongoing to this day. This was so stressful, I requested Brenda to take over the trust executory responsibilities on my behalf, which she graciously accepted. We still haven't been able to confirm homeowners insurance, so we've not settled this aspect of the estate, which has massive financial implications. In addition, during this time, I've been under significant stress and have subsequently developed aggressive cancer that was diagnosed August of 2019. Many experts say that cancer develops often within a year of a significant deleterious life event, and Brenda, as a physician, strongly believes that my father's death and the circumstances surrounding his death contributed to my current cancer status. I'm now in treatment trying to battle this scary cancer diagnosis. In addition, my sister was battling breast cancer during our father's untimely death, and she died in August of 2019. Perhaps the stress of our father's dying contributed to an earlier death for her as well. We'll never truly know the impact this event has had on my health and that of my sister. As Brenda and I think about the future without my father, we just feel robbed of the potentially happy years and memories. We do not wish this on anyone and hope for justice such that PG&E makes restitution for the enormous loss our family has suffered. The good news is we are Christians and believe we will see my father again in a land made new where no more sorrow, tears, or pain can touch us. This is what makes the loss of my father and the situation surrounding his death manageable. The next victim would be Bernice Regan. Statement reads, our names are Judy and Wayne Potter, P-O-T-T-E-R, daughter and son of Bernice M. Regan, respectively. Our mother was not able to escape to safety from her home during the campfire on November of 2018. It is hard to put into words what the loss of our mother has meant to us. One of the hardest times through the process was the 2.5 weeks we did not know what had happened to her, a virtual eternity. We had the sheriff's office do a wellness check. The Saturday after the fire, we were told no human remains were found at her address. Good news, right? It was a time of running every time the phone rang the first week after the check. Then as time wore on, when the phone rang, it was a time of being frightened and hopeful at the same time, and not knowing if we would have news or not. A time of getting concerned phone calls from friends. They did not know we had started flinching with every call. DNA testing was traumatic in itself. It was like admitting that she could be dead. Then the dreaded knock at the door came, the police officers there to impart the news. The news you had still hoped would not come. Now came the nightmares of how she must died and wondering how she felt, if she was afraid and feeling alone, if it seemed like an eternity, like it was waiting to know for us. Next, the nights you are afraid to sleep for fear of the nightmares. Then dealing with the mortuary and having the realities sink in that you will never see your mother again. 2.5 weeks was a long time to be on pins and needles, but afterward was worse. It was not only the only trial we had to go through. Soon after the announcement in the newspaper of her death, her mail was diverted which we were depending on to help us sort out her accounts. Fraud to the tune of thousands of dollars on her bank account reared its ugly head, and we were investigated for it when we knew it was clearly not us. So we had to deal with that as well as our loss. All of this time, we should have been celebrating Christmas with her instead, sharing happy times, not grief. How does one put into words the gaping hole left for us that Christmas or all the Christmases to follow? How will the holidays ever be the same? How long does it take to stop going to the phone to call her daily? Her number is still programmed in our phone. How do you cancel the vacation you had planned with her, all the while still hoping she would magically appear? How do you stop missing her? And the tears, when do they stop? These are questions that may be answered with time. Our mother was a vibrant part of our community, Paradise. She volunteered for the Elks Lodge every week, as well as the Paradise Senior Thrift Store. She participated in activities at the Senior Center, such as bingo, pinochle, and ballroom dancing. She was active every day of the week. She was co-grand marshal of the Gold Nugget Parade in 2016. She was Person of the Year for the Elks in 2017. Not only did we experience the loss, but so has the town of Paradise. Just writing this has caused all the anguish to come crashing down on us again. Nothing will be the same. There's no way to put a value on her lack of presence or the contribution to our family unit in society. So as you can see, the loss of our mother was very harmful to us all. The next victim would be Bernice Schmidt. Statement reads, my name is Helen D. Van Drew. Van, separate from Drew, and D-R-E-W. And Bernice E. Schmidt was my sister. PG&E knew they had outdated equipment, and yet they refused to update and replace it. They were aware that transformers could explode at any time and that sparks could start a wildfire. PG&E was willfully negligent in their duty to prevent such fires and provide energy safely to their customers. Bernice was the last living sibling that I had. She and I would take turns calling each other every day. We would talk about what was going on in our lives. I missed talking to her so very much. She was the last remaining link to my childhood. In our last phone call, Bernice knew about the fire and was nervous about what might happen. I can't imagine the horror she experienced knowing the fire was getting close to her with no way to escape, and what awaited her when it did get to her house. This was an unimaginable way to die. Bernice was the last of my siblings. I miss talking to her every day and thinking of our growing up together. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think of Bernice. The next would be Don Shores. Be Don and Kathy Shores. My name is David A. Shores. Donald Eugene Shores II was my only sibling and my older brother. We grew up together and went on vacations together with our parents. As adults, our journey took us different directions, but we still stayed in contact through phone calls and letters. We were able to visit each other occasionally as we lived several thousand miles from each other. I'm now the only member of our family still living. The morning of November 8th, 2018, took my brother and his beloved wife's life. The fact that Don and his wife, Kat, died, burned alive as human sacrifice for a pagan company is inexcusable. The home and the community that they loved were destroyed by the negligence of a company whose only concern seemed to be making profits. Human life means nothing, apparently. If a person killed 85 persons and admitted to killing them, would they not receive the full punishment of the law? These are people in PG&E there are people in PG&E who made the decisions to do the same. My wife and I visited my brother's home in February of 2019 as we traveled to Chico to take care of my brother's remains. The memory of the devastation to my brother's home, the remains of their lives in the surrounding communities, Magalia, Paradise, and Conkel, are forever burned in my mind. Warped steel beams, melted glass and aluminum, screws that had popped out of the siding, washer and dryer, fused together, and some items not even identifiable was all that was left. A pink ribbon tied to the mailbox designated that people had died there. The community was devoid of animal noises, no birds, no squirrels, no pets, no nothing. The silence was of death. I was fortunate my brother had been in the Navy. The Veterans Administration paid for the cremation of the remains of my brother and his wife and their burial together in the Sacramento Valley National Cemetery. Red Cross provided funds for travel and lodging to California in February and March. FEMA has covered the cost of much of the property cleanup. Any legal fees for property probate I will have to cover out of the estate. This being said, what is the value of a human life? Don was an active member of the Paradise Baptist Church. He ran the sound system for the church services and other events helped by the church for the community. He led a weekly men's Bible study. He and his wife enjoy members of their subdivision in Magalia playing cards, dominoes, or enjoying coffee and conversation. Don was married to his soulmate for only a few years. They enjoyed traveling in their small motorhome, visiting California's parks, lakes, in Oregon and Washington coasts. They loved their dogs and cats, feeding many of the homeless cats in their neighborhood. They were denied growing old together. Perhaps the worst part of this entire event is the fact that the corporation involved does not face the same consequences that any individual would be faced with. Throughout history, there have been many instances where one individual caused the death of many others and have faced years of imprisonment or even a death penalty for their actions. However, when a corporation is involved in negligent homicide, they only face a hefty fine, which merely cuts into their profit margin for 1 year and then go back to business as usual. From what I've read in the news articles about the fire, it is well known by PG&E that the equipment that caused the fire and so many deaths was defective and needed to be replaced. Indeed, one news article reported that PG&E was responsible for over 1,500 fires in a 6-year period. Yet they ignored the situation and handed out dividends of $798 million in 2017 and $925 million in 2016, a total of $1.723 billion. Those dividends could have easily been more than enough to allow for the replacement of old, worn-out equipment. Additionally, when a corporation is worth billions of dollars and hands out billions of dollars in dividends, a fine of a few million is not a deterrent. That is merely a line item expenditure in the budget. The corporation merely programs a couple of $1 million for penalties and continues to allow the equipment to deteriorate so they could hand out billions in dividends. The purpose of a corporation is to provide service to a population and be paid a reasonable return for its efforts. When a corporation loses sight of its responsibilities and obligations and uses its position to take money out of one person's pocket to put in another person's pocket and allows its equipment to become dangerous to the population, strong corrective action needs to be taken. Ultimately, the buck stops in the CEO's office, and it is his responsibility to see that the corporation is set straight. But if the CEO is more interested in handing out dividends than ensuring that lives are not lost, the CEO should be charged with negligent homicide, and prison should be the goal. Not only would PG&E be sent a message that business as usual will not be tolerated, but it will send a message to all corporations that operating in a criminally negligent manner will not be tolerated, and the CEO will pay the ultimate price for the misconduct. Only when persons are held responsible within a corporation will the policies and practices of that corporation stop the negligent behavior. Mass murderers are not tolerated in our society. Incorporation should not be allowed to be a shield of protection to mass deaths. Next victim be Larry Smith. The letter reads, "Hello, I am Gary Donald Smith, the twin brother of deceased Larry Ronald Smith. We were born on July 1, 1938 in Fresno, California. We were a large family with 3 girls and 5 boys. Larry and I were the youngest, and I am now the only surviving member of our family. The fire which took my brother's life was preventable. PG&E had prior knowledge that under certain weather conditions, the probability of a fire starting because of their equipment was high. PG&E took little to no action to remedy this problem. Their negligence and lack of due diligence in protecting the public from their equipment is the cause of my twin brother's death. I live in Washington State, near Tacoma. My wife of 63 years, Martha Yvonne Smith, died on September 19, 2018, after suffering from dementia for several years. I had planned to move in with Larry after my wife died. Larry's house was on a half acre and had 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. Larry died November 25, 2018, after suffering in the hospital with 3rd-degree burns on his body and organ failure after multiple surgeries and skin grafts. He suffered greatly. I currently live with my daughter and grandson here in Washington State. Having lost Larry due to the fire and now knowing I will not have the security of living with my twin depresses me greatly. Besides being twins, Larry and I shared many of our life's journeys together. We both joined the Army at 15 together, later sailed with the Merchant Marines until retiring. Sharing the stories that defined our lives is immensely sorrowful. Larry was a kind man, a quiet man who would do anything for anyone to help them. I had hoped we would share our last years together, both of us remembering life's journeys which brought us to Paradise, California. I would have liked both of us to slowly go gentle into that good night instead of having Larry suffer so much because of the fire. His loss to me is incalculable. We have 4 left.
You want to finish today?
We can.
Go for it.
Okay. This is Victoria Taft. My name is Christina Taft, and it's T-A-F-T. Victoria Taft, the victim of the campfire, was my mother, and we lived together in Paradise. On November 7, Pacific Gas and Electric failed to turn off the power as a precaution for fire-prone areas and failed to send notifications to us in our household as well as others about high winds increasing risk. Nearly every year, the region had fires, but not as deadly as the high-voltage ignition points on November 8. We had no official warnings received either from PG&E or the local government to evacuate. My mom had heard rumors of an evacuation and fire risk secondhand from the neighbor, Alice Barr, who only knew because one of her relatives saw a fire on the way to Chico. Again, not an official warning. Multiple people were seniors Multiple people who were seniors over the phone did not think it was serious enough to leave quickly or early. In fact, one left at 2 p.m., I found out later, so my mother did not go with me in the evacuation. I repeatedly called 911 after I was out of the danger zone of Paradise to Chico, but they were not evacuating anyone on buses or vehicles. Apparently, they didn't even hear the right city or mark the right city down correctly. I just wanted someone to tell my mother to leave or to get to her, since I wasn't enough of an authority for her to listen. I ended up losing my only family growing up as a result of this devastation. Victoria was a single stay-at-home mother to me, and I only talked more to a brother of hers after the fire. It's horrifying me for over a year and causes high amounts of sadness, guilt, loss, frustration, shame, and pain. It is a lifelong problem. It just goes back further into the mind. Of course, I've had extensive financial issues which apply to all of the categories listed. I have not been able to work full-time or for long periods of time since the fire. I lived together with codependency for economic stability. I recently went into an MBA program, but I'm still not able to be employed. Too much tedious work has caused me to become fearful or stressed, or if I'm forced to feel helpless, caused by inability to go where I need to. Because if I hadn't left, many believed I may not be here anymore. The simulation showed it going in two directions to the house 30 or so minutes after I left, cutting the streets off. The crime is crippling, but knowing that people could have prevented and responded to the fire is needed. It's why it needed to be called a crime with perpetrators, not an act of a deity or merely a natural disaster. No one wanted to do anything to prevent or respond to emergencies or take responsibilities, and authorities have still not contacted those who lost family about what they should do differently. I think emergency technology should be updated, centralized. I do not know why the local politicians or journalists I've interviewed with never contacted Adian Corporation's founder about offering to improve emergency systems with artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things. Many people wanted me to do something regarding this and for the victims, but no one provides us any power. I'm the only one I feel like that's persistently bothering people to update these systems, including geolocation satellite systems. Again, it's why stating it's a crime is so important. I was also once a scholar for PG&E, and they never bothered to ask victims who lost family about how they can improve. Next would be victim Isabelle Webb. The letter reads, my name is Susan Jensen, Jensen, and I am from a large Hispanic family. I was born and raised in San Francisco along with my cousin, Isabelle Webb, who was tragically killed in her Paradise home. This devastating news impacted me as well as my family because Isabelita, as we lovingly called her, was virtually raised in my childhood home and embraced as family. Since I lived in a large 3-story house with 7 other siblings, 3 nephews, and 1 niece, many the same age as Isabelita, she was sent to play with us. Our aging grandmother, Isabel Herrera, was cared for by Isabelita's divorced mother, Lucille Webb, Aunt Lucy, so Isabelita needed to spend time with us. However, Isabelita was very shy and withdrawn most of the time, so my mother, her Aunt Maria, would lovingly nurture her in a proactive manner, role modeling for all of us how to interact with Isabelita. After the death of our grandmother, Isabelle, and of both of our mothers. Isabelita lived in her San Francisco home alone and unmarried until the Loma Prieta earthquake made that home uninhabitable. My unmarried brother, Brad James, moved Isabelita into his home while he and our nephew, Joey Ruiz, repaired and prepared her home for sale. Isabelita wanted to move out of San Francisco to a less populated and more affordable living area for her later elder years. A friend of mine whose father lived in Paradise found the ideal property with not only a house, but an existing detached rental to provide additional income. Isabelita decided to purchase this property, so my sister, Virginia Hall, and I not only moved her to Paradise, but helped to set up her home and take her shopping for essential supplies. We were hoping that the natural beauty and trees would help ease Isabelita's social anxiety. Unfortunately, that was not meant to be. And now my family, and especially my sister Virginia, and I suffer from guilt and anxiety ourselves, knowing that we were instrumental in moving Isabelita to her death. The images of that devastating fire and the knowledge of how helpless and afraid Isabelita must have been felt, not to mention how she haunts our dreams with the cries of horror and suffering is in being charred beyond recognition. It's all too much. I pray Isabelita and those who suffered and died with her are at peace, and I pray for those who suffer and grieve along with that these same horrific images may cease and we too can find peace in the days and years to come. Thank you for allowing me to take this time to read this most difficult thing to express. Next would be David Young. And Papa read that. This would be the final one here. My name is Dennis Ray Young. I am the younger brother of David Young. I believe it is a crime financially and economical. PG&E tried to save money and crew and forgot their common sense. I am a person who believes that family comes first and is very important. This fire took my brother's life. It also took my home and everything I had and made me have to start over. I had to come up with the money to pay for my brother's funeral expenses. David was a veteran who served his time in the Vietnam War. We both enlisted at a very young age. I was 17 and he was only 23 years old. The war was very hard on him and he lived most of his life in fear. He was afraid that he was going to end up coming home in a body bag. He made it back home and lived a happy life until his fear came true. PG&E made him lose over 23 days. PG&E made him lost for over 23 days until the DNA test came back positive. I also had to pray to cremate him. My brother and I share our lives together, and we were very close. We spent our time together from when we joined the Navy to living in the mountains together. I love spending our free time outdoors. I loved him more than anything and missed the time we could have had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ramsey. Council, are there other issues to be addressed this afternoon?
Just the note, Your Honor, we do have one victim that we expect in the morning if he can make it emotionally.
Very well. The court will adjourn for the rest of the day. We will reconvene tomorrow morning That will be June 18th at 8 o'clock in the morning initially to address media requests. It's anticipated then that we would commence further proceedings tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. That will include, hopefully we'll hear from an additional family member of a victim, and then I am anticipating that we would proceed with sentencing.
Sure.
So we are adjourned for the day.
Thank you, Ron.